Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Making Action Happen. I'm Sarah Blackhurst.
And I'm Brian McKay.
And we've got Chancellor Joe Garcia with us today. He is the Chancellor of Colorado Community College System, and he is visiting with us a little bit today about some concerns and the impacts of the upcoming bill on collective bargaining. So thanks so much for being with us, Chancellor. We appreciate it. We have listeners, of course, all over the state, but also all over the country and in other countries. So would you start by just introducing yourself and who you are and what you do for Colorado, not just the community colleges, but as a whole?
Thank you, Sarah. I am the Chancellor of the Community College System in Colorado, which consists of 13 colleges in about 38 locations in every corner of Colorado. We serve about 120,000 undergraduate students every year and about 100,000 high school students every year. And our mission is to provide high quality, low-cost education. And the people we serve, and this is really important, tend to be first-generation and low-income students. And we really have to be focused on affordability and keeping tuition low with everything we do.
So for the majority of, if I understand this right, for the majority of our rural communities, the community college system is the first stop. So those who are getting higher education in our rural communities are using the community college system, correct?
That's true. We're the only campuses that typically have a physical location in many rural communities.
So post-pandemic and everything that's going on, there's been really it's been really smooth for community colleges. You guys are doing great. There's no problems, right?
Not quite. We've continued to deliver instruction. We've done a lot of it online over the last 2 years. That's something we were used to. We've done that in the past. It's challenging, though, for many of our students who often don't have access either to high-speed internet or even the devices necessary so that they can download assignments and upload their work. So it's been challenging for our students, and we've lost a lot of students. And this is true for community colleges nationally.
It's been a huge, huge problem in Colorado, I know. So we work closely with a lot of your college presidents who are some of the most dynamic and amazing people. We have some on our board. We work closely with them. And so we have a really good connection with them. So, and I sit on Dr. Patty Erjavik's community advisory board for Pueblo Community College, and she is the one that first came to me with deep, deep concerns about a collective bargaining bill that's coming up. So I know that right now that what's left in the bill, as far as we know, it hasn't been introduced yet, but it would affect, in particular, counties and community and higher ed, both of them. And we've gotten some pretty alarming numbers on the impacts of that. Can you unpack a little bit on what that's going to look like for community colleges?
Absolutely. But first, let me preface my comments by saying we know that our faculty, our staff, our administrators, all of our employees are the most valuable assets we have when it comes to delivering the services and the instruction that our students need. We also know that many of our faculty, many of our administrators are underpaid compared to their national peers. That's the reality. We don't like that any more than they do because we run the risk of losing our very best employees. We need them. We would love to be able to pay them more to hang on to them and to be able to attract and retain high quality employees. That is absolutely true. Collective bargaining doesn't concern us because it would allow employees to have a stronger voice. Frankly, we want them to have a strong voice, and they currently do. But we also have certain resource constraints. If we want to pay our employees more, we have to have more money, and the only place we can get more money is frankly from our students through increasing tuition. Because we only get money really from two sources, the state general fund and student tuition. And when that general fund isn't going up, but expenses do, then tuition has to go up. That's our big concern.
So in the last little bit, I know that some of the community colleges have, you've had to RIF in a few, there's been programs that you've had to shut down. This is across the board, but You've also, the big part of that you already alluded to is reduction in your enrollment numbers. Are there any projections that you have on that's going to go up anytime soon?
No, it really does not look promising for a lot of reasons. First, we are down about 10% over the last 2 years. And so when you're down 10% in enrollments, you're down 10% in tuition revenue. That's a significant hit. If you don't also reduce your expenses, you're going to overspend. And again, most of our budget goes to personnel costs. That's why we have to look very carefully at every single employee, every single program, and determine what's really critical to our ability to deliver on our mission. And if it's not, then we need to look at cutting it in order to increase our efficiencies and reduce our expenses. But because students have not been very engaged in high school the last 2 years, many of them have fallen behind academically. Many of them have not met with counselors face-to-face to get advice about moving on to college. And frankly, the economy is strong, so students who are high school graduates are able to earn more than they were 2 or 3 years ago, and they're taking advantage of that by going directly into the workforce. That may not pay off for them in the long run, but they see it as paying off for them now, so they're delaying entry into college, and so we're not anticipating a quick turnaround in that enrollment decline.
One thing I want to ask is, financially, if this does go through and passes like we're guessing it's going to look, what would be the financial impact to the community colleges?
Well, the financial impact comes in two ways. One is if there are increased salaries and benefits as a result. But more immediately, just the costs of negotiation for collective bargaining. We would have to have new human resources professionals at the system office and at each college. We'd have to have dramatically more spent on legal services. So all of those things, and we project costs just for the negotiation and collective bargaining process. When you look at all 13 colleges, 38 locations, we're looking at costs anywhere from $3 to $12 million per year.
Wow.
And that, again, is assuming no increase in salaries or benefits. So we know the cost could be high and unpredictable.
And has there been any engagement from the lawmakers that are drafting this legislation?
Well, we have recently had a chance to meet with one of the sponsors, but we hadn't had much engagement from the beginning. We knew this bill was coming. They told us it was coming, but we've not had the opportunity to review drafts, and we still haven't seen the bill that's expected to drop in the next few days. We don't know if there have been changes made to it based on our input or not.
So, based on that, and that's concerning to hear that it was very late in the game. Have you had any of your faculty staff express that they're frustrated or wanting to have more of a voice? What's that been what does that look like for you?
Really, we've had very little of that. We have faculty senates at each college, and we have a state faculty council member on our board of governors. So we hear regularly from faculty. We hadn't been hearing as much from our adjunct faculty, and they're critically important. So we created what's called we call an Instructor's Council, so that the adjunct faculty at each college get to vote for their own representative. We don't pick them, the faculty do. And then that group comes together as a state Instructors Council, and they recently put together a proposal for increased salaries. It was very well argued. It was very well put together. And they presented that to us, and we are presenting it to the board and to our presidents to consider as we move forward to build our budgets for next year. So they do have a voice, and we value that voice and that input.
So if this bill passed, you would not be able to, it sounds like you would not be able to even consider any kind of pay increase.
Well, certainly not with the fiscal environment we're in now. What I told the bill sponsor and the head of the labor organization behind this is that this really should be step two. If we do not first address the structural funding problems that we have here in Colorado around funding public institutions of higher education, it's the collective bargaining isn't really going to help. Collective bargaining cannot force us to pay money we do not have. We saw it happen in New Mexico 2 years ago with the collective bargaining bill. That bill said you can collectively bargain, but the institutions can only increase pay in an amount that's consistent with their increase in the state budget. And so there, the employees collectively bargained, and they got the same 3% that they would have received had there been no collective bargaining.
Right.
So it really didn't help anybody.
I want to make sure everybody knows that you previously served as Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, and when you did that, you became intimately aware, involved with how the fiscal policy for Colorado works, and that's something that's unique. Most people don't understand that. So there's nothing that you say here or share here that you don't intimately understand with regard to the state budget, correct?
That is correct. I've been, of course, I was the Lieutenant Governor. I was also the head of the State Department of Higher Education. So I worked with all of the higher education institutions in the state. I was also the president of the University-Pueblo. Previous to that, I was president of Pikes Peak Community College. So I presented before the Joint Budget Committee virtually every year in the last 20 years. I know how the state budget works, and I know what our restrictions are because of the various constitutional provisions that are unique here in Colorado.
Well, we don't want to take any more of your time. I know you have to run. Any last words before you go?
Just this, that we really do care about our employees. We really do think it's important to pay them fairly. We know it because they have other places they can go if we don't provide working conditions that are supportive and salaries that are not livable. We want to be able to do both of those things regardless of whether we have collective bargaining. We just do not see that collective bargaining is a constructive way to get to those results.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And I got to throw this out here too. I don't know if you remember me, but we went to the Allard Capital Conference together. That was a bit younger and less gray, but I appreciate all your hard work. And I went to CSU-Pueblo when you were there, and you always work great with me through my various professions through the years. So I appreciate that personally.
It's my pleasure. It's good to see you there.
Thank you, and thank you, Chancellor. You do so much. The college, the community college system is such a vital part of education for Colorado, and I just appreciate that you're there at the helm and that you're always willing to get in and mix it up and make sure that the right thing gets done.
I appreciate that. Thank you both.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Oh my goodness, so much going on.
Yeah. Like I mentioned at the end there. Man, I was young, and we brought everybody out to D.C., and Chancellor Garcia and his wife went out there, and we did this Capitol conference where they got to meet everybody in D.C., and it was pretty cool. And he really helped CSU-Pueblo. A lot of their faculty and administration came out with it, so I got to know them. And unfortunately, it was towards the end of that job. We knew we were going away, but I've always respected him in any capacity that he's been in. He's always been there to lend a hand and help, whether it was with constituent services or setting up meetings to addressing some of the issues from a state level, a school level, anything. So it was good to have him on the show and talk to him about this very, very important issue that's coming up and see the perspective from that side of the argument.
Well, and he's always been such a champion for any marginalized communities. He's always stood up and made his voice known. And so I think everybody looks to him, especially to be really the resource, but also the champion for these issues. And I think you've got to go, if Chancellor Garcia has a problem with it, we should all be paying attention to it. Yes. Because he's very supportive of his, and he has a really great working relationship with all the college presidents. He doesn't ignore anybody. And even us, I've met with him several times here and what needs to be done. And I think one of the, when we talk about workforce development and education, one of the most important things that I think the community college adds to that is the ease with which you can do dual enrollment while you're in high school. It's a hugely important piece, and it's expanded tremendously since he has been the chancellor. Yeah,
and one thing that we didn't talk about, I know we spoke about it on the show before, is that a community college offers an opportunity specifically for a non-traditional student.
Yeah.
So basically a non-traditional student is anybody that's not going to college out of high school.
Right.
The larger universities, they do cater to that, but I mean, that's the community college's bread and butter, right? It's like you're a mom and, you're hitting your 30s, your kids are old enough, you could go back to school, get a career, get some training, whatever it is. You can go to a community college and they do everything. They bend over backwards to make that work, to help you succeed.
Yeah.
And all universities do. It's just that the community colleges, that's kind of what they cater to.
No, they do such a great, it's a huge service. And when you think about the worries about the costs of education, we're not going to give the twins a choice. The twins are going to do that. They're going to do dual enrollment when they get there. But, he's right. And I guess that's with a lot of the bills that are happening right now that we're concerned about, that we're tracking. And
to be fair, the majority of these bills start off with good intentions, right?
Oh, no, they do. They're good intentions.
Nobody's out to ruin community colleges.
No.
The ag industry or whatever. But it is good intentions. But it bothers me when, the person that is in charge of all of these community colleges in the state said he is just now engaging with one of the bill authors, whereas they've been working on this, as we know, for
2 years.
Yeah, it's been out there
for 2 years,
and it seems like from his perspective, it's been crickets. And not only with this legislation, we've seen it with others.
So this was an interesting conversation that I had, and I was told I might be getting a call from the press about this, but it's this whole idea of the importance of the stakeholder process.
Yes.
So the other bills we're watching right now that we're genuinely concerned about honestly have to do with their impacts on the housing crisis. And again, they start out with great intentions. They start out with, let's do this because we see that this is a problem. Now, is it actually a problem, or are there solutions that are already in place? Who else is working on all the things that we're forced to ask every time we start to do a project, or somebody comes to us with something like, who else is working on this? Blah, blah, blah. We ask all those things. So the stakeholder process that I participated in yesterday, and let me back up and say, in years past, this has been robust. The stakeholder process has been robust. And I get that during COVID some of the stuff went by the wayside. And I'm not trying to fault anybody for that. It's nobody's responsibility to fix everything that everything that's wrong. But a stakeholder process has to include more than lip service. It has to be actually what's going on and where are we at with it. So I testified on House Bill 1244 a couple of weeks ago. That was an air toxins bill. We talked about this before, but we don't take a position on a bill unless it's already been introduced. So all we can do is express our opinion on the concept of the bill ahead of time, like we're doing right now with this collective bargaining thing.
Because we don't even know what it's going to be.
No, we don't. And there might just be a few amendments. It might be fine, and there's a few amendments that everybody can live with or whatever. But that stakeholder process has to be in place. Otherwise, you're doing what we're seeing right now, where there's bills that are waiting to be introduced. The reason yesterday was weird, and I don't even know it wasn't signed yet. It hasn't been introduced, but they said we're going to do the stakeholder process. So they called us. We all got on this call. They talked about some of the concepts in the bill. They didn't show us the bill. They didn't show us the language. We asked about a fiscal note. They wouldn't share the fiscal note. We asked about who their partners were, what stakeholder. And then we got some conflicting information about it. How can we weigh in on a bill we haven't seen? And then they're going to say, well, we did the stakeholder process.
And for those who may not know, how long is left in this session?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. And the amount of bills that have been introduced, thankfully, has gone way down. I think there's right around, last count, there was like right around 536 or something. Like 2 weeks ago, it was 536. But then we're hearing about all these bills that haven't gotten introduced yet. And how are we going to manage this? I'm literally, because we've got the housing summit next week.
Yep.
And I might be spending most of my week at the Capitol, but we don't know, because they're going to introduce, it used to be they'd introduce a bill on a Thursday late, and we'd all scream because you're introducing a bill late on a Thursday. And then they would have it would be in committee hearings on Tuesday or Wednesday the next week. And so that's not, adequate stakeholder input on any of this. The reason that's such a big deal is because look at what we just heard from the Chancellor. Mm-hmm. This will be hugely impactful they don't need it right this second. They don't need it. They're going to do all these services that needs to happen, especially an increase in pay and benefits that need to happen for their staff, especially in light of the tremendous increase of inflation right this second. It's not going to benefit them. But why are we not having these conversations earlier on?
Yeah, because then they could work through the details, like he said, and I'm glad he brought it up, but the New Mexico bill, I have a close friend whose wife is a teacher in New Mexico, and she was talking about that, how, they went through the collective bargaining process, and their raise was exactly the same as it would have been
had they not.
How
crazy is this?
At the same time as that, they had to cut different areas of her department based on revenue, because like you said, you have to pay for the legal side of it, the HR side of it. So in doing that, she actually, one of her co-professors went part-time, and then she took over half of the classes for the same amount of money, basically, because in their budget.
You're supposed to be serving students. How does this serve students? I don't understand that.
I think this isn't anything against collective bargaining. We're not trying to say that. This is just unintended consequences, and an example of where, without the engagement and really seeing the big picture, kind of a one-size-fits-all, that it does have negative consequences. Again, starting with good intentions, but there is a negative aspect to it.
Well, and I think the impact on rural. So we're talking about collective bargaining, and it hasn't been introduced. Maybe it won't get introduced. I don't know.
We don't know.
Hopefully
there's enough noise being made.
That it doesn't happen.
Sit back and work on it. Work on this, spend some time on it, engage with people, find a solution. Don't just hey, we're going to do this, but we're not going to show you what it is. Right. It's almost over.
Right.
Boom.
So then, so the housing ones. So it's from three different angles. So we're looking at one, and let me give credit where credit's due. Representative Wiseman texted me this morning, saying, I understand that Action 22 has some opinions on House Bill 1363 that's been introduced and it's going to be in committee next week. Which is sorry, when you're in it, you get the numbers all the time, and then they get thrown out, and it gets all muddled in your head.
Yeah.
It's about special districts, but in particular, metropolitan districts. Now, I'm going to have the conversation, so I'm not going to go into detail with you now. We will go into detail on this, but because of, I'm just going to give you the long and short of it. There needs to be some consumer protections with regard to metropolitan districts, and there needs to be consumer protections on everything. I mean, they just need to do that. But when you take out mechanisms for investment to not get a return, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So right now what we're looking at is whether or not, and I'm giving benefit of the doubt because the legislator reached out specifically to us. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on it. But because of Tabor in Colorado, local governments cannot do these big housing projects, these big housing developments, okay, because of Tabor, because we don't want governments to get over grown. That's a whole other issue. So this would preclude investment the way it's reading right this minute. This would preclude investors from making any kind of return. And that's the only way housing projects would move forward, or housing developments would move forward. Do you see the problem?
Yeah. And again, investors, if they go into a housing project, they're not looking to make like a ton of profit right off the bat.
No.
It's a sure way for long-term return, like low long-term return. It's not just like going and building a bunch of apartments and, charging them $1 billion to live there or whatever.
And honestly, the market won't bear that, but we are in a housing crisis.
Yes.
So you've got a bill like that, and then you've got another bill that that's being introduced and discussed about residential housing. There's lots of discussion about this, residential and commercial buildings having to go through a statewide code that would prevent them from using or implementing natural gas. And again, that's another one that there's decisions being made. Those need to be made on the local level. Mm-hmm. If you have a problem with air quality, then you can do that or do whatever you need to do. But that needs to be local. Somebody in Denver should not be making the decisions on how our building codes go for Pueblo County or Los Animas County or some of these other counties. We don't have the same problems that they do. And so when we talk about housing, the housing crisis, I want to scream, please first do no harm. Look around and say, is this impact going to be worth the cost that's going to be paid for this? So you've got all these layers of all these different pieces of legislation that are coming in, and we're trying to solve the housing crisis.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this when we keep getting hit after hit after hit? It's exhausting.
Although,
I'm very tired.
I will not name any names.
Okay.
But there are a few areas in Colorado where I think that somebody needs to come in and implement a building code. And if you know what I'm talking about, know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
There has to be a little bit of control.
There's got to be some control, but that's got to be local,
right?
I know. It needs to be the local people.
I'm just joking, but
still.
Well,
no, I think you talk about it you've talked about it quite a bit, and we've seen some implementation where, like for example, there's a vacant tax or something. It's not a tax, but it's a tax.
The vacancy.
The vacancy, like that's been highly effective. But those need to be local discussions and not statewide. Let's slap this on everybody. But even so there were all those fires up in Boulder County.
Yep.
And I don't know, I'm sure they call it Louisville because we're in Colorado, but if it's Louisville, whatever, that community, they're struggling. What their houses were insured for will not pay for them to rebuild it. And it's not like they're just going to get this money. Most of those insurance policies are to rebuild, not to just pay off your mortgage or pay it out. And they're not going to be able to do that because the cost overruns with inflation and building and all that. Now you're going to add so much more with a regulation that really doesn't deliver any kind of net gain. We'll call it that way.
I think.
Okay. What do you think?
That when you are looking to introduce something like this, that, these bills that we're saying impacts rural Colorado, mostly financially, to be fair, this is all financial.
No, it is.
Rural Colorado, even though, we made it through the pandemic, okay, but even pre-pandemic, we're struggling financially, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the hospital argument in, like say Pueblo or Alamosa or anywhere. It's like they're operating on a 0.01% margin of profit.
And they have anything go wrong, and they're in the red.
And that's similar to our rural counties, right?
Oh my gosh! Yes, thanks for bringing up
they're actually
counties.
losing.
Yes.
Like most of them are losing money on it,
or they're way in. And we looked at this a couple of years ago. What happens when a county goes bankrupt?
Yeah, it's bad. But my thought, and somebody was talking about this, like, hey, why don't we take these these great ideas, again, good intentions, and say, well, let's just try it in Denver. Let's do this. Let's try it in Denver for 5 years and look back and see what the impacts were and what it actually did. And then we'll talk about taking it through the rest of the state, or, furthering it out. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works.
It's not. And
can they even do that? Can you legislate something for a specific county or city from a state level, or does it have to be?
We call them pilot programs.
So you could like start a pilot program in Denver, but can you enforce it?
Oh, I don't know.
Because if they pass legislation, does it have to?
So can they pass legislation that only applies to Pueblo County?
Yeah. Or could they pass legislation that only applies to cities or counties over a certain population?
So
I think that's the way to do it.
So here's how, that's right. So here's how they do it. They'll say, we're going to pass this, but you can opt out. Like there's certain parameters they'll set that, okay, this won't apply to you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you're under this size, or if you're this, or if you're that. And I'm thinking if I can think of an example of that with this group of this particular set of legislation, if there's opt out, but then that goes into sometimes the opt out, it has to get voted on, like debrucing, for example.
Well, what if
let's
you did
muddy the waters as much as we can?
What if they did something like, say, an air quality thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say you pass a bill that says you must adhere to these standards or go through this process if your quality of air is this high.
Yeah, so that's when they start talking about attainment, non-attainment, and that. And some of it, especially in past years, when they've worked really, really hard and they've gone through the stakeholder process and they've produced some really decent bills that have the really great bills are ones that have gotten beat to death before they get in there. But that's the good part. But legislators don't want to deal with that now. But and I can understand it. You want to get something done, and it feels overwhelming to try to do that. But
and not to mention, we're going into an election cycle.
Oh,
just throwing that out there too.
I just made that noise. That was me sighing, going ugh. Yes, and of course that's going to play a part in it, and we all get it. I guess that's the whole thing is when we're looking, and I'm going to talk about this honestly a little bit at the Housing Summit. I'm going to take some executive liberty and talk about who do you serve? When we're talking about who, considering who you're going to run or who you're going to vote for, because here's what's interesting. And you don't hear this right this minute because it's a terrifying number for some people. So I think, is it 42 or 46% of Coloradan voters are unaffiliated now?
Yeah, I always think, and it's gone up, but it's generally like a third.
Yeah, so but this number, I saw something this last week where it was like 42 or 46%.
That might be specifically for an area. I forget. I always looked at it as a third.
Yeah, I always thought a third. But what I'm saying is, I think those numbers are going up.
Oh, they're definitely going up.
So is the person that you're considering voting for, and your vote, if you subscribe to the idea that your vote matters and you're trying to decide who you're going to hire to represent you, are they serving Coloradans? I'm just going to leave it there. Are they serving Coloradans, or who are they serving? And while I appreciate the intent, I wish that they would look at their intent was first do no harm.
Yeah.
Can we put that? Is there a way to slap that on legislation? Some kind of metrics to say first do no harm. Okay.
So with that, we do have the Housing Summit next week. We do. So this Friday, when this goes up, it'll be the Friday after you hear this, the upcoming Friday when you hear this.
Yeah, April 29th.
Yep, April 29th. Go to action22.org to get all the information on how to register tickets, what's going to happen. I have the agenda on there. Thank all of our wonderful sponsors for it. Take a look at that.
Yeah. I'm very excited for your comments. You're going to speak.
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting I'm going to speak. I have no idea what I'm going to speak about, but it will be fun.
No, I do. I know what you're going to speak
Okay.
about. All this really great. So there's some really great solutions that we've heard as we started working on this that you're going to talk about. I know what you're going to talk about because
Yep.
I'm already telling everybody.
Yep.
But also some of the veteran, because that's a big concern is the housing side for veterans. That's a constant concern, right?
Oh yeah. Either houses cannot pass inspection for a VA loan or a first-time homebuyer's loan, or they're too much for them. So like Pueblo County is a really good example where you were able to come in, buy a decent house for not a lot of money, and your VA loan can cover it. Now they're just turning them away because they're asking, 50, 60, 80, 100,000 over what it was 2 years ago. And unfortunately, first-time homebuyers and VA loans can't get those houses.
Well, and the inspection,
And that's
talk about that.
Yeah, when you go, so you go lower, right? So you go buy a house that may not be as good as what you want.
Right.
And due to the aging housing stock in these areas, over 50 years old up to 120 years old, they cannot pass a VA inspection. I'll tell you this. My house was built in like 73, and it did not pass a VA inspection, and it is taken care of. And so we had to do, I think we had to put in like a couple $grand worth of work just so it could pass inspection.
And you did that couple grand worth of work, what, 2 years ago?
4 years ago.
4 years ago?
3 or 4 years
so
ago.
that few $1,000s would triple.
If
this minute, today.
And if I wanted to buy my house for what it's worth now with my VA loan, I would not have been able to do it.
Same with us.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a VA loan, but yeah, there's no way we could afford to get our house what it's valued at now as compared to when we bought it like 12, 13 years ago or whatever. So these are the solutions we're going to be trying to talk about. We're going to try to figure out how to navigate some of these, some of this new legislation that's coming down. We're hoping that we're going to make a loud enough noise that our legislators and decision makers will stop and say, okay, we need to either rethink this, pull this bill, work on it over the summer, and come back. That's our hope on some of these things, and we'll put it out there. I talked with Beasley this morning, and he said, Action 22 would be really great to host some of these stakeholder things. So we'll be happy to do that if we can genuinely have conversations that so the impact is first do no harm. So we hope you guys join us. We're sorry that it was kind of doom and gloom today. We're really excited to see everybody at the Housing Summit. I'm looking forward to it. We've gotten lots of help along the way. We've got really great sponsors. We're going to put on a really fun event for you. If you've already registered, you're going to be getting a packet in the next few days about parking and all that great stuff that you need to know. Also, if you've not been into an Action 22 event before, this is wear sneakers because this is intense. It goes really, really fast. Your brain is going to be really full to overflowing by the time you're done, but you're going to be able to turn around and deliver to your communities some really productive solutions that can be implemented today. So,
with that, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, email us at show@action22.org. If you're interested in becoming a member of Action 22, which you should be, go to action22.org, and you can find the information there. And we will be back probably in a week. It's been busy, so we're kind of hit and miss right now with everything going on, but we'll get back at you probably next week.
Yep. And hey, Chad Vorthman, I know you're listening. So there's a total badass lobbyist that I see at the Capitol all the time I want to talk to you about someday. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.